The ship landed on Vreth at midday, when the sky was the color of old copper, and two small moons were still visible near the horizon. The landing pad was made of black stone, smooth and wide, and the air smelled like something between rain and metal. It was not unpleasant. It was just not anything like home. Commander Owen Garrett stepped out first. That was his job. He always went first, not because he was ordered to, but because it felt wrong to send someone else into something he had not tested himself. He was 31 years old, built lean and solid, with short brown hair and eyes that were always doing the work of reading a room before his mouth opened. He had been in the Coalition infantry for 6 years. He had been in difficult places. He had stood in front of things that wanted to kill him, and found ways to keep standing. He had never stood on a planet like this one. Behind him came the rest of the unit. Nadia Flores was second, her dark hair pulled back tight, her eyes already moving across the landing area with the automatic scan of someone who had spent years looking for threats. She was the unit's communication specialist, and the best shot any of them had ever seen. After her came Greg Holt, the medic, calm and easy the way still water is calm, the kind of person who got quieter as things got harder. Then Leo Banks, who said very little and noticed everything. And last, stepping onto the black stone with careful, deliberate steps, was Corporal Danny Cole. Danny was 22 years old. He was the youngest member of the unit by 4 years, and he looked it. He was not the tallest or the heaviest. He had an open face and light brown eyes, and the kind of stillness that some people are born with, and others spend a lifetime trying to learn. He had been with Owen's unit for 6 months. In that time, he had never been the loudest in a room. He had also never once made the wrong call when it mattered. Owen had picked him for this mission specifically. He did not think Danny needed to know. The Coalition had been trying to open a diplomatic relationship with the Vrethian people for 2 years. The Vrethians were not hostile. They were also not easy. They were an old species, proud in the way that only comes from centuries of being right about most things, and they did not open their doors for just anyone. When they finally agreed to meet, they had one condition: no weapons, no large delegation. Send 5 of your fighters, unarmed, and stand in our hall. Let us look at you. It was a test of trust. Owen understood that. He had prepared his unit for 3 days straight, drilling them on protocol. No sudden movements, no direct eye contact with the royal family unless they invited it, no speaking unless spoken to first. Be still, be respectful, do not let them see you sweat. 2 Vrethian guards met them at the edge of the landing pad and led them without a word toward the palace. Owen walked and looked and did not react to what he saw, because reacting was not professional, but internally he was absorbing everything. The palace was enormous. The stone it was built from shifted color the way an oil slick does, cycling through violet and silver and something that had no name he knew. The doors were 30 feet high. The hallway they walked through was lit by no visible source, just a soft, even glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The throne hall was worse, in the best possible way. The ceiling disappeared into mist. The floor was the same black stone as the landing pad, and every step made a small, clear sound that carried a long way. Vrethian nobles lined the sides of the hall, standing very still, watching. They were tall, most of them close to 8 feet, with copper skin and double-ring eyes, gold on the inside and black on the outside, and they wore deep-colored fabrics that seemed to move even when the people wearing them did not. At the far end of the hall, on a throne of pale carved stone, sat King Avrith. Not fragile old, but settled old. The kind of old that has stopped being in a hurry because it has already seen enough to know how things tend to go. His eyes were steady and patient, and they moved over Owen's unit, the way you look at something you have been waiting a long time to see. Owen stopped at the correct distance. He gave the bow he had practiced. He kept his voice level. Honored King Avrith, the Interstellar Coalition thanks you for this welcome and for the trust it represents." The king looked at him for a long moment. Then he spoke in Vrethian, and the translator pendant at Owen's collar converted it 1 second later. "You are smaller than we imagined," the king said. "We often are," Owen replied. Something moved through the watching nobles. Not laughter exactly, but something in that direction, a shift in the air, a loosening of attention into something closer to interest. Then the side door opened. She came in from the left, and the entire hall noticed her, the way a room notices when a window is opened and the air changes. She was tall even for a Vrethian, and she moved the way people move when they have never once doubted they belong exactly where they are. Her skin was copper with a faint rose underneath. Her hair was black and threaded through with something that caught the light like fine wire. She wore the deep blue of the royal family, and she wore it like she had been born in it, which she had. Princess Sarah Avrith, the king's only daughter. She had spent 5 years commanding patrol ships on the outer border before being called home. Owen had read her file 3 times. He had thought he was prepared. He had not been fully prepared. She took her place beside her father's throne and looked at the 5 humans standing in the hall. Her double-ring eyes moved slowly from left to right. She was not scanning for threat. She was reading something in each person, something Owen could not identify from the outside. She moved past Owen, past Nadia, past Greg, past Leo. She stopped. Her eyes had settled on the far right end of the line. Danny Cole stood perfectly still. His hands were at his sides. His face was careful and neutral. If he felt anything about being looked at by an alien princess in front of an entire royal court, he was not showing it. The princess looked at him for a long time. Long enough that the hall noticed. Long enough that the king tilted his head slightly. Then Sarah Avrith spoke. Her voice was clear and even and carried to every corner of the room. "That one," she said, and the translator caught it a breath later. "The youngest. He will be mine." The hall went completely silent. Owen kept his face still. He kept breathing. He heard from the far right end of his line the smallest possible sound, which was Danny Cole making absolutely no sound at all. The silence stretched out across the black stone floor and climbed the walls, and sat in the mist at the top of the ceiling, and waited to see what would happen next. The silence did not last forever. Silences never do. But this one lasted long enough that Owen felt it in his shoulders, a pressure building there, like the beginning of a storm. He did not look at Danny. He kept his eyes on the king. King Avrith was looking at his daughter. His expression was not angry. It was not even particularly surprised. It was the expression of a man who had been expecting something from a certain direction and had just seen it arrive, though perhaps not in the exact shape he had imagined. He was patient about it, the way you are patient about weather. Sarah was still looking at Danny. She had not moved. She had said her words, and she was waiting the way someone waits after placing something down on a table, steady and certain, letting the thing be seen. Owen made his choice. He kept his voice respectful. He kept it quiet. He did not raise it, and he did not soften it. "Your Highness," he said, "with the greatest respect for this court and for your royal family, Corporal Cole is a member of this coalition unit. He is a soldier under my command. He is not a gift that can be offered or claimed. We came here in peace, and we hope very much to leave in peace. But our people are not property." He felt the court shift. It was subtle, the way a crowd shifts when something unexpected is said in a quiet room. Several nobles straightened. A few hands moved. Owen did not know if those hands were moving toward weapons or toward ceremony, and he was not in a position to find out without starting something he did not want to start. The king watched Owen the way you watch a small river that has just changed direction. Sarah finally moved her gaze from Danny to Owen. She looked at him the way a person looks at a wall they are deciding whether to walk around or through. Then something in her settled, and she looked at him differently, the way you look at someone who has just done something you were not sure they would do. You speak for him. It was not quite a question. I speak for my unit, Owen said. Does he have no voice of his own? He does, and he will use it when the time is right. She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked back at Danny. Then let the time be now, she said. Let him speak. Owen did not look at Danny. He trusted him or he did not, and 6 months of working together had built the kind of knowledge you cannot fake. He trusted Danny. He waited. Danny took one step forward. His voice came out level. Owen was quietly proud of that. Your Highness, Danny said. I don't know exactly what you mean by yours. In my culture, that word carries a lot of different meanings. Some of them are good. Some of them aren't. Could you tell me what you mean by it? The hall was very still. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something to her father, in Vrethian, that the translator did not catch, too low and too fast, and the king answered with a single word. She turned back to Danny. I will explain, she said, but not here. Not like this, standing in a ceremony hall with the whole court listening. She glanced at Owen. Give me your people for one evening. I will explain what I mean, and you will understand, and you will decide from there what you want to do. That is all I am asking. Owen considered it. He looked at the king. The king gave him the slight tilt of the head that the translator had defined in the briefing documents as a gesture of honest assurance. We accept, Owen said. They were taken to rooms in the east wing of the palace, while the formal part of the audience was quietly concluded. The rooms were large and strange, the ceilings very high, the furniture built for people with a longer reach and a different center of gravity. The windows looked out over a city that stretched all the way to the edge of the sky. Layers of buildings in the shifting mineral color of the palace stone, busy and old, and entirely unlike anything any of them had grown up looking at. Owen called a meeting the moment the steward left them alone. They sat in his room, the 5 of them, some on the 2 large chairs, and Danny on the floor because the chair made no sense for his proportions. Owen stood by the window and looked at each of them in turn. Talk to me, he said. She doesn't seem hostile, Nadia said. The way she looked at Danny, it wasn't threat. I've watched a lot of faces in a lot of bad rooms. That wasn't that. Agreed, Greg said. He was leaning back in his chair with his arms folded, the picture of calm. The king looked like he was waiting for her to do something, not worried, just watching. She knew about Relay 9, Leo said from the corner. He said it quietly, the way Leo said everything. The room adjusted to that. Relay 9 was 14 months ago. A Keth boarding party had hit the station during a resupply run. The unit had been there. Things had gone badly fast. By the end of it, 3 people were injured, the corridor was compromised, and Danny had been the last one standing between the Keth and the wounded. He had no weapon left. He had used the corridor itself, collapsed a section of the outer wall to trap the boarding party, and then gone back for the injured before he thought about himself for even a second. It had been in the after-action report. The after-action report was classified. That's a problem for fleet intelligence to figure out, Danny said. Not for us. Not right now. Owen looked at him. How are you doing? I'm fine, Danny said. I'm thinking. About what? About why it matters to her. What I did at Relay 9. There are human fighters who have done a lot more than I have. Bigger fights. Higher stakes. Why me specifically? That's what tonight is supposed to answer, Nadia said. Owen nodded. Nobody agrees to anything tonight. We listen, we ask questions, we take nothing at face value until we understand what we're actually being offered. He looked at Danny specifically. You can talk to her, but you don't commit, not to anything. Understood? Understood, Danny said. But after the others went to their rooms and Owen was alone, he stood at the window for a long time and thought about the way Sarah Avrith had looked at Danny. It was not the way you look at something you want to take. It was the way you look at something you have been trying to understand for a long time, and have finally found a way to reach. He had been a commander long enough to know the difference. He was not sure yet if that made this better or more complicated. In his experience, those two things were often the same. In the room down the hall, Danny Cole sat on the floor and looked at the alien city through the too large window and thought about what it meant to be seen. The evening meal was held in a smaller room off the main hall, which in Vrethian terms meant a room that could have comfortably housed a Coalition shuttle, and still had space left over. The table was long and low by human standards, the kind of low where you either sit on cushions or feel wrong the entire meal. The cushions were provided. They were large and dense and surprisingly comfortable. King Avreth did not attend. He sent his apologies through the steward, a message that managed to be both polite and clearly intentional. This evening was not for the king. The king knew it. He was giving his daughter room to do what she needed to do. Sarah sat across from Danny, with Owen to Danny's left and Nadia to his right. Greg and Leo were further down the table, talking quietly with two Vrethian nobles, who seemed genuinely curious about human medicine, and had cornered Greg within the first 5 minutes. Greg handled it the way he handled everything, which was calmly and with complete attention. The food was strange and most of it was good. There was one thing that tasted like soap, and one thing that tasted so deeply savory that Nadia ate 3 portions of it and looked slightly guilty about it. They drank something warm that had no alcohol in it, but created a mild, pleasant warmth in the chest, and the conversation around the table moved slowly from formal to something that had more air in it. Sarah waited. She was patient in the way that people are patient, when they are confident the conversation will get to where they need it to go. It was Danny who moved it there. "You said you'd explain," he said, not pushing, just reminding her that the door was open. She looked at him across the table. In the warmer light of this smaller room, her copper skin had a depth to it that the cold glow of the throne hall had not shown. Her double-ring eyes were steady. "In our language," she said, "there is no word that separates belonging from partnership. We do not have them as two ideas. We have one idea, which is that when you commit yourself to someone in the work that matters most to you, you are theirs and they are yours. And those two things are the same thing. There is no ownership without the equal weight going the other direction." Owen leaned forward slightly. "So when you said he will be mine, I meant he will be my equal in the work I care about most," she said. "My combat partner, my student, and my teacher both." She paused. "I understand that in your language the word mine does not carry the reverse automatically. I understand why what I said caused alarm. I am sorry for that. The concept does not translate cleanly." The table was quiet for a moment. "What work do you care about most?" Danny asked. "Making my people better," she said simply. "I spent 5 years on the border watching every species we encountered in conflict. I studied how they fight, how they think, how they decide things in the worst moments. I brought everything I learned back here. I have been building a new training philosophy for our military for 3 years. But there is a piece I cannot find. A piece I have seen in humans and only in humans, and I cannot teach it because I do not fully understand where it comes from." "What piece?" Danny said. She looked at him directly. "At Relay Station 9, 14 months ago, everything went wrong. You had no weapon, your unit was down, the corridor was broken. Every trained response available to a soldier in that situation says you fight, or you run, or you freeze. You did none of those things. You looked at what was actually in front of you, with no time and no resources, and you used it. You used the broken thing as the solution." Danny said nothing. "I have watched hundreds of battles," Sarah said. "I have watched humans more than any other species, because you are the most unpredictable, and therefore the most interesting. I have seen that quality in 3 human fighters in all my years of study. The other 2 are gone. You are here." She let that sit for a moment. "I am not asking to own you. I am asking to learn from you, and I will teach you everything I know in return. My combat system, my border experience, 5 years of what I saw out there. All of it." Owen said, "That's a significant offer." "I know what I am offering," she said. Nadia was watching Sarah the way Nadia watched things she was trying to decide about. Her face was careful and even, but her eyes were doing a lot of work. After a moment she said, "Why didn't you just ask? Why did you say it that way, in the throne hall, in front of everyone?" Sarah was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Because if I had walked up to your commander privately and asked to borrow one of his fighters for a training exchange, he would have said yes or no, based on politics and protocol. I wanted to see how your unit would react. I wanted to see who would speak first. I wanted to see if the youngest one would stand there and wait to be told what to think, or if he would ask his own question." The table was very still. "It was a test," Owen said. "It was an introduction," Sarah said. "There is a difference. A test has a passing grade and a failing grade. An introduction just shows you what something is." "And what did you see?" Danny said. She looked at him calmly. "I saw a commander who stepped in front of his youngest person without hesitation, and pushed back on a royal in her own court. I saw a unit that closed together instead of separating. And I saw you." She tilted her head slightly. "You were nervous. I could see that. But you asked a question instead of waiting for someone else to handle it. That is not nothing." Danny was quiet for a moment. He looked down at the table, then back up at her. "You've been watching human fighters for years," he said. "You've probably seen a lot of people do a lot of impressive things. Why does it have to be me specifically? Why not just request a training exchange through official channels and get whoever the coalition sends?" Sarah said, "Because the coalition would send me someone impressive. And impressive is not what I need." She paused. "I need someone who sees the way you see. I cannot find that in a personnel file. I found it by watching, and what I watched was you." The warm drink had cooled slightly in Danny's cup. He looked at it for a moment. "I have to talk to my commander," he said. "And the coalition office has to approve it. And I want everything written out clearly so both sides understand what they're agreeing to." "Of course," she said. "But I'm not saying no," he said. Something changed in Sarah's face. It was small, just a slight shift around her eyes, but it was there. It was the look of someone who has been holding something carefully for a long time and has just been told they can set it down. Owen watched it happen and said nothing. He picked up his cup and drank, and looked at the alien city through the tall window, and thought that this was either the beginning of something very good or something very complicated. In his experience, the best things usually started out as both. Danny found the courtyard by accident. He had woken before the rest of the unit, which was not unusual. He had always been an early riser, something that had started in childhood and never left. Back home in Ohio, he used to sit on the back porch before anyone else was awake and watch the light change across the fields. Here on Vreth, he walked the East Wing corridor until he found a door that opened onto a courtyard behind the palace, and he stepped out into air that was cool and carried that metal rain smell, and he felt something in his chest loosen a little. The courtyard was open and plain, black stone underfoot, a low wall on the far side, the city stretching out below. Two of Vreth's small moons were still in the sky, pale and close together, fading as the light grew. There was no one there. Danny sat down in the middle of it, crossed his legs, and did the breathing exercise his grandmother had taught him when he was 8 years old. Breathe in for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold again. It was not complicated. It worked. He had a lot to think about. He was still working through it when he heard footsteps. Vrethians walked differently from humans. Their weight sat further forward, and the sound of their steps was a particular rhythm once you had heard it enough. He recognized it without looking up. He stayed where he was. Sarah stopped a few feet away and looked down at him sitting on the stone. He looked up at her. "You are very calm for someone in a strange place," she said. "I'm not entirely calm," he said. "I'm doing the thing that makes me calm." She looked at him for a moment, then she sat down across from him, which was a long way down for someone her height. But she did it without any hesitation, folding her long legs in a way that was not the same as how he was sitting, but had the same feeling behind it, deliberate, grounded. They sat in the growing light, and said nothing for a moment. The city below was beginning to wake up. Distant sounds drifted up, something like voices, something like machines, something that might have been music. "Can I ask you something?" Danny said. "Yes. Last night you said you'd seen that quality, the thing at Relay 9, in 3 human fighters. And the other 2 are gone." He paused. "How did they die?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "The first was in the HFY War, 6 years ago. A rearguard action. He held a pass alone for 4 hours so his unit could evacuate. He did not survive." She said it plainly, the way someone who has looked at death a long time says the things they have made peace with. "The second was not in battle. She died in a ship accident 2 years ago. A docking failure. Nothing to do with fighting." A short pause. "That one was harder to accept. There is something in battle deaths that can be understood. Random accidents feel like waste." "Were you close to them?" "No. I only knew them through the records, through the watching." She looked at him. "I felt the loss of what they were, though. What they knew. What they could have taught." Danny nodded slowly. He understood that kind of loss, the loss of something you had not had yet but could see the shape of. "At Relay 9, he said, "I wasn't thinking about any of the things you described. I wasn't thinking about improvising, or staying flexible or any of it. I was thinking about getting my people out. That's all." "I know," Sarah said. "That is the point." He looked at her. "The thinking was not separate from the action," she said. "You did not stop to decide to be flexible. You were flexible because the only thing in your mind was the actual goal, not the method. When the method fails, a person who is attached to it freezes. You were not attached to it. You were only attached to the goal." She paused. "My people are very skilled. They are also very proud of their skill. And when the skill does not work, the pride creates a hesitation. Just a moment. But in bad enough situations, a moment is everything." Danny thought about that. He turned it over slowly. "Your grandmother," Sarah said. "You mentioned her last night. The things she said about the situation telling you what to do. You remembered that." "I remember everything you say," she said. It was not a romantic thing. It was factual, the way she said most things. "Tell me about her." Danny half smiled. "She taught high school science in a small town in Ohio for 30 years. She was not a soldier. She had never been in a fight in her life, as far as I know. But she had a way of looking at problems that was different from anyone else I've known. She always said most people spend their energy arguing with the situation, trying to make it what they want it to be instead of what it is. She said the situation is always telling you the solution. You just have to get out of your own way and listen to it." Sarah was very still. "She sounds like someone my people would consider a philosopher," she said. "She made very good pie," Danny said. "She would have laughed at being called a philosopher." Something moved across Sarah's face. It was not quite a smile, not the way a human smile looks, but it was in that direction. A warmth, a recognition of something. "My mother died when I was young," she said. "My father raised me. He taught me to lead, to command, to think in terms of nations and histories and long decisions. He is a good teacher." She paused. "But I always wondered what it would have been like to have someone who taught me small things, ordinary things, things that seem unimportant, but carry something important inside them." She was looking out at the city, not at him, and her expression was the open kind that people wear when they are not performing anything. "She would have liked you," he said. "She liked people who asked the real questions." Sarah looked back at him. "Will you train with me?" It was a question, and also something more than a question. It had the feeling of something she had been carrying a long time, and was now carefully placing down between them, offering it without force. Danny did not answer immediately. He looked at the city, he looked at the 2 fading moons. He thought about Ohio and his grandmother's kitchen and the back porch in the early morning. And then he thought about Relay 9 and what he had done there and why. And then he looked at this alien woman sitting on the black stone across from him with her double-ring eyes, patient and honest and waiting. "Owen has to approve it," he said. and the coalition office, and I want clear terms on paper." "I understand," she said. "But yes," he said, "I'll train with you." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "You answered the second part first." "I know," Danny said. "The yes was the part that mattered." The city below kept waking up. The moons finished fading. The light came in fully, the copper-colored Vrethian morning light that turned the black stone of the courtyard warm. And the two of them sat there a little while longer before either of them moved, because neither of them was in a hurry, and the morning was very still, and there was nothing else that needed to be said right then. The agreement took 4 days to put together. Owen read every line of it at least twice. Nadia read it after him, and flagged 2 phrases that needed clearer language. The Coalition Diplomatic Office sent 3 amendments from their station, and the Vrethian Court sent 2 responses, and in the end, the document was clean and simple, and said what it meant. Danny Cole would remain under Owen's command, and attached to the Coalition mission. For a period of 60 days, he would train each morning with Princess Sarah Avrith in the palace combat halls. The training was mutual. Both would teach. Both would learn. Nothing classified by either government would change hands. Either party could end the arrangement with 3 days' notice and no penalty. Danny signed it. Owen countersigned. The king pressed his seal into the wax at the bottom without reading it first, which Owen found mildly alarming. But the king had the look of someone who had already made his decision about this weeks ago, and was just waiting for the paperwork to agree with him. Sarah signed last. She read every word before she did it. Owen respected that. The first morning, Danny walked into the palace combat hall at dawn and found it already occupied. Sarah was there, with 4 members of her personal guard, all of them a head taller than him, and carrying the kind of relaxed physical ease that came from a lifetime of being the most dangerous person in any room. The hall was large and high-ceilinged, the same black stone everywhere, with racks of practice weapons along the walls, and a raised platform at the far end, and the floor smooth and wide and empty between. The 4 guards looked at Danny with the polite neutral expression of people who were trying not to look like they were assessing whether he was worth anyone's time. Danny had seen that look before. He did not mind it. Sarah looked at him without any of that, just direct, the way she always was. "How do you want to begin?" she said. Danny looked at her. "Show me how you move. Don't fight anything. Don't demonstrate technique. Just move around the space the way you naturally do. I want to see the base before anything else." One of the guards made a small sound. It might have been doubt. Sarah looked at Danny for one more moment. Then she moved. It was extraordinary. The Vrethian combat form was built on commitment and power. Every motion fully dedicated, no wasted energy, no half measures. Each step was placed with total certainty. Each shift of weight was complete. She was fast, and she was fluid, and she had clearly been doing this since she was very young. And the whole shape of it was the shape of something that expected to win, and was built around that expectation. Danny watched and did not move. When she stopped, he said, "That's beautiful." Sarah tilted her head slightly. "I mean it," he said. "The form is perfect for what it's built for. The problem is what it's built for." He walked out onto the floor a few feet. "You fight like you expect the ground to be there. Like you expect the walls to be there. Like you expect the situation to hold the shape you walked into. What happens when it doesn't?" Sarah looked at him steadily. "Show me what you mean." "Come at me," Danny said. "Seriously, full speed, full force. Don't hold back because I'm smaller." The guard who had made the doubtful sound earlier made it again, a little louder. Owen was standing in the doorway. He had followed at a distance, not officially supervising, just present. He closed his eyes briefly when Danny said, "Don't hold back," then opened them again. He had trusted Danny this far. He was not going to stop now. Sarah came at Danny. She was fast. She was very fast, and she was strong, and the form she used was exactly as committed and powerful as it had looked. She crossed the hall in about 2 seconds and hit the space where Danny had been. He was not there. He was already moving sideways, not back, sideways along the wall. And what he did in the next 30 seconds was not a fight in any traditional sense of the word. He used the raised platform as a barrier, let her forward momentum carry past it, used the edge of the weapon rack to redirect himself, and within half a minute was standing on the platform at the far end, while Sarah was in the middle of the floor, having just arrived at 3 different places where he no longer was. She stopped. She stood very still in the center of the hall and looked at him. The 4 guards were completely silent. Danny stepped down from the platform. He was breathing harder than he wanted to be. She had come very close, twice. He was honest with himself about that. The ground was there, he said, but I wasn't. When the situation doesn't hold the shape you planned for, you have to stop fighting the situation and start using it. He paused. Your form is built for an opponent who stands and meets you. The moment the opponent stops doing that, the form becomes a direction with nothing at the end of it. Sarah looked at him for a long time. Again, she said. They trained for 2 hours that first morning. By the end of it, Sarah had adapted 3 times, which was more than Danny had expected. She was not slow. She was exactly what she had described herself as. Someone who learned by watching and then by doing. And when she saw something clearly, she moved toward it without argument. By the end of the 2nd week, she was catching him twice out of every 5 attempts, instead of 0. By the end of the 3rd week, it was 3 out of 5, and Danny was working harder than he had worked in a long time. In the afternoons, she taught him the Vrethian form, and he discovered that it was even harder than it looked, that the commitment it required was a different kind of discipline than anything in his background, that throwing yourself fully into emotion with no reservation was something you had to train yourself to do because every instinct wanted to hedge. He was not good at it at first. He was patient about not being good at it, which she noticed and said nothing about, but he could see that she had noticed. The evenings were sometimes work and sometimes not. Some evenings they sat in the courtyard and talked about her years on the border, about his childhood in Ohio, about his grandmother and her philosophy about situations and solutions, about the 2 fighters Sarah had watched and lost, about what it meant to try to make your people better, and about how you teach something that lives in a way of seeing rather than in a technique. On the 31st day of training, Owen told Danny quietly that the Coalition Diplomatic Office had informed him the trade agreement between humans and the Vrethian people had been formally signed. The mission had succeeded. They could leave whenever they were ready. Danny went to find Sarah. She was in the combat hall, alone, running through the Vrethian form slowly, which she sometimes did at the end of the day. He watched from the doorway for a moment, and then stepped in. The trade agreement is signed, he said. My father told me this morning, she said. She stopped and looked at him. You are leaving. The mission is done, he said. We have to go back. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I submitted a request to the Coalition Diplomatic Office 6 days ago. I did not tell you, because I did not want it to affect the training. Danny waited. I asked for an extended exchange, she said. 6 months. 3 months at a Coalition training facility with 4 of my guard. 3 months here with you. She paused. The office approved it 2 days ago. Danny looked at her. You didn't tell me, he said. No, she said. I wanted to see if you would leave without hesitation when the mission ended, or if you would come to find me first. Danny was quiet for a moment. You tested me, he said. I introduced myself, she said. There is a difference. He looked at her for a long moment. The combat hall was very still. The light was the late afternoon kind, low and warm, and it made the black stone walls look almost soft. 6 months, he said. 6 months, she said. He nodded slowly. I'll talk to Owen. He turned to go. He had his hand on the door when she said his name, not his rank, just Danny. It was the first time she had said it that way. He turned back. Thank you, she said, quietly and completely without performance. For the yes, that was the part that mattered. Danny looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Ask me again in 6 months." He walked out into the corridor. Behind him, in the empty combat hall, Sarah Avreth stood very still for a few seconds, and then something that was absolutely a smile crossed her face, and she went back to her form.